Today on Reparations in Action.
You know, our wealth is always being stolen and it's being looted. So that's what makes that statement, Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, such a dishonest statement.
You're listening to Reparations in Action.
Reparations now!
Uhuru. You're listening to the Reparations in Action podcast and FM radio show, the White Lies Shattered series. My name is Jamie Simpson. White Lies Shattered is a program of reparations in action, exposing the insidious lies that we tell ourselves as white or European people about the nature and origin of America and the current social system. We believe reparations to African people is the key question of our times and is one that demands action on the part of European or white people. As always, we'd like to salute Black Power 96, where this show is aired and recorded for our podcast weekly. Today, we are talking about the profound history of African resistance to colonial slavery, with a special emphasis on the highly underrated significance of the African Revolution of Haiti, which won its victory in 1804 and was led by and fought by enslaved African workers who were forced by the European powers and the U.S. to pay billions of dollars of reparations to France for the destruction of what was considered French property. That property, of course, African human beings. Today's episode is called How the Haitian Revolution Changed the World. We were very honored to have a chance to speak with Elikya and Ngoma, a member of the African People's Socialist Party and the Haiti editor of the Burning Spear newspaper, who spoke to us about the profound influence that the Haitian Revolution had on African resistance and anti-colonial struggle around the world. Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee and author of the book Overturning the Culture of Violence, also joined the discussion on the significance of the Haitian Revolution. First, we turn to our conversation with Elikya and Ngoma of the African People's Socialist Party. Elikya is the Haiti expert of the African People's Socialist Party and the Haiti editor for the Burning Spear newspaper. As the Burning Spear newspaper's Haiti editor, Elikya has written extensively about the Haitian Revolution as what Chairman Amalia Shatella calls the first successful workers' revolution in the world. We asked Elikya to talk to us about the African Revolution of Haiti and its significance historically and today.
Uhuru, yes. First of all, thank you for having me on. As you said, Chairman Amalia Shatella refers to the African Revolution of Haiti as the first successful workers' revolution in the world. And that is important because when people talk about workers' revolutions, people always talk about Russia or China or Vietnam. But the first workers' revolution was led by African people. And it was the African Revolution of Haiti. This was the first time that enslaved African people were successful in a revolution to overthrow colonial slavery. That's not to say that African people outside of Haiti were not fighting as well, because African people have always been resisting against colonial slavery. But Haiti had the organization that is necessary to lead a revolution. They had the revolutionary leader in the form of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And it was the biggest threat to capitalism, which in the African People's Socialist Party, we understand, came to existence through the process of the genocide of the indigenous peoples of the places we call Americas and the enslavement of African people. And on the question of workers, in the party, we say that African people are the true workers of the world because it is we who create all of the value that exists in the world. And, most of that value, most of that wealth has been stolen from Africa and African people. So that is how we sum up the Haitian Revolution, or how we say it, the African Revolution of Haiti.
Turning to more recent events, on July 7th of 2021, Haitian President Jovenel Moïse was shot to death in his home by what appear to have been mercenaries and his wife was critically injured. Since that time, some 28 people have been arrested in connection with the assassination. 15 of these have been Colombian citizens, and 2 have been U.S. citizens. We asked Elikya to talk to us about the African People's Socialist Party's take on this assassination of Jovenel Moise.
Uhuru, up until this point, there has been much confusion as far as what really happened, who really did it. For one thing, we do have our beliefs that the United States was involved in this for one reason or another, including that, Jovenel Moise was highly unpopular amongst the people of Haiti. His presidency had been protested against since the day he first stepped into office. In fact, he only won 6% of the vote. So he was not someone that the people had ever been a fan of. And ever since he came into presidency, there has always been protests against him. Most notably, people can point to the protest that took place between 2018, August of 2018, up until February of 2020, which was only stopped by the coronavirus or the colonial virus. But from August 2018 and the whole of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, people were still resisting against him. So he gave a lot of problems, or, it was very hard for him to maintain what little power he had, even though he was, installed by the United States. So that could be a reason that his presidency just made it too problematic for them to maintain control over Haiti. But I know that our stance is how we should see him, because there have been forces in and out of Haiti who have tried to paint him as some type of martyr, or as if he was a hero, or that we should have sympathy for him. But we don't have any sympathy for any neocolonial forces. He was a representative of white power imperialism extending or continuing its rule on Haiti. And I have written an article that you can find in the Burning Spear newspaper that actually sums up his presidency from when he got into office to the type of stance that he has taken against African people. I've written about him a few times, actually, for the Burning Spear newspaper, that this is not someone that African people should celebrate whatsoever. He was behind a lot of the state-sponsored gangs that are plaguing the country right now. He was just an enemy of the people. So that's how we sum him up in the African People's Socialist Party.
As a follow-up question, we asked Elikya to compare and contrast the assassination of Jovenel Moise with the removal or the coup waged against the first democratically elected president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide.
Jean-Bertrand Aristide was the first democratically elected president in Haiti. And although he was not a revolutionary, he was, what we would characterize as a progressive force. Some of the things that people would praise him for is including demanding retributions from France, that France pay back the money that they forced Haiti to pay France after the revolution, where we overthrew the French. That is one thing. But during this whole period leading up until Jovenel's assassination, a lot of people had tried to compare what was going on in Haiti in terms of the gangs, the kidnappings, and make it comparable to what was taking place when Aristide was in power. But they are completely different situations. The United States formed illegal coups coups against Aristide to get rid of him. It was the United States that wanted to get rid of him, clearly, like not speculation or anything like that. It was certain that they wanted to get him out of there, and, they kidnapped him and dropped him off in Africa. And that is a statement as well, that they would drop him off in Africa. Whereas the gangs and the kidnapping that was happening under Jovenel. Jovenel was tied to those in terms of like funding them. And of course, Jovenel worked for the United States as well. So I guess on surface level, or maybe not on surface level, they look the same way. And people might see, okay, during Aristide's time, there were gangs and murders and stuff like that. And during Jovenel's time, there were gangs and murders again. So perhaps Jovenel is as problematic as Aristide, or Aristide was as problematic as Jovenel. But it's not the same thing that we're seeing over. One of them was the United States doing what it could to get rid of a progressive, again, not revolutionary, but still progressive leader, and a leader that the people actually wanted there. And the other is someone who was trying to maintain his power, even though the people made it clear that they did not want him there, and someone who was working for the United States itself.
In her presentation at a recent Haiti webinar hosted by the African People's Socialist Party, and in her article in the Burning Spear, Elikya criticized how the U.S. and European media often refer to Haiti as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We asked her to talk to us a bit about that characterization.
Yes, it was indeed a criticism because it's not true. One thing that Chairman Omali Ishitella says that I've heard him say a lot is that the media has a way of taking facts and presenting it as the truth, but they're using the facts to cover up the truth. And so to say that Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, first of all, they say it for any time they're going to talk about Haiti. If they're talking about Jovenel being assassinated, it's quite irrelevant if Haiti is the quote unquote poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. He was assassinated. That's what you're reporting on. Or the question of an earthquake or hurricane. That one may have some other implications in terms of like the lack of infrastructure, but they don't even take the conversation there. They don't say that, natural disasters are so devastating in Haiti because the neocolonial powers that work for the United States refuse to build infrastructure, and they take the wealth of Haiti, making it the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and so they're going to lose this. They don't say anything like that. They just say it as if it's a part of Haiti's last name. But the truth is, Haiti was forced to pay France reparations after the revolution that was won in 1804. And France made Haiti pay this reparations because at one time, France called Haiti the Pearl of the Antilles because of how much wealth that it was making for France during colonial slavery. And of course, France enslaved other places as well. They colonized other places as well. But Haiti was, the real money maker for them. And so how do you go from being the Pearl of the Antilles, which it was never a pearl for us, to being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere? Well, after the revolution, France demanded that Haiti pay reparations for the loss of their property. And the property that they were talking about was ourselves, our human selves as African people. And, and actually Haiti paid France $90 billion if you had to convert the amount of money that they paid to today's gold prices. That's $90 billion with a B. And those payments went on until 1947. So that was 122 years. And then there's also from 1915 to 1934, where the United States occupied Haiti. And, and in 1947, the United States controlled the Haiti's treasury and stole every ounce of gold that was there and brought it to New York City within the United States. So there has always been ongoing theft of Haiti. And there are other things too. When you look at the way the economy was affected by the United States forcing Haitian farmers to to sell and kill off the indigenous black pigs, the black pigs that had been a really important part of the economy and actually had been there since the Taino people were on the island as well. Giving them like $1 or very minimal amount of money, but forcing them to kill off the pigs. And there's the question of the rice tariff that took place under Bill Clinton. There's so many attacks that have been made on the economy of Haiti. So it's not just the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It's a country that is impoverished by the United States, which the media never says. It's a country that is, our wealth is always being stolen and it's being looted. So that's what makes that statement, Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, such a dishonest statement. And also it's a statement of how, when you hear it every single time, it informs you of how you should even think about Haiti. And then for Africans ourselves, especially those of us who are from Haiti, that also is supposed to inform us of how we're supposed to think about ourselves as well.
We asked Elikya to talk to us a bit about that question of reparations as it relates to Haiti and its colonizers, in particular France and the United States.
Yes, so the question of reparations, first when you're looking at the word reparations itself and what it means to repair. And so this is why the African People's Socialist Party and our organizations, is always raising the demand of reparations to African people, because over the past 600 years, living under colonialism and in some places in more recent history, neocolonialism, all of everything has been stolen from us in terms of lives and wealth, resources, natural resources, human resources. You can't really actually quantify how much has been stolen from African people. But the point is reparations are due and repair. So when you're talking about Haiti and the question of reparations, not only is Haiti owed retribution, to bring it back to what Jean-Bertrand Aristide demanded that France pays, which is basically pay back the money that you force us to pay you. But Africans in Haiti is due reparations also for colonial slavery, just like Africans around the world are due reparations. But when you look at, the word to repair, how can the enslaver ask the enslaved to repair? The enslaved organizes ourselves and overthrows slavery. And the enslaver says, okay, you have to repair, the lost damages, as if slavery was not something that has done more damage than you can ever think of to the enslaved. So, that's how we have to look at understanding the question of reparations as it relates, to African people. And then the fact that Haiti was forced to pay reparations, that is just, criminal. It's just, it's criminally offensive.
On Saturday, August 14th, 2021, Haiti experienced a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. We asked Elikya, first of all, if she could tell us whether her family and loved ones are safe, and to speak to us about what we need to understand about what's happening on the ground in Haiti right now in the wake of this earthquake.
Yes, thank you. I'm grateful that my family is okay. Most of my family is not in that area. They are in northern Haiti. They felt it themselves. I spoke with my older brother who, has faced some damages to his home, but it's not, too bad, especially not as bad as people who were in southern Haiti, where the earthquake actually hit. But everybody has felt it. But, in that area, they've been gravely affected by it. The earthquake that hit Haiti on August 14 was a 7.2 magnitude. And the earthquake that hit Haiti on January 12, 2010 was a 7.0 magnitude earthquake. So, this one was of higher magnitude and it was worse. And at first, we were not really getting reports of too many high numbers. I think any number of a death is too many, not only in general because you're talking about human, but also because, as I've said earlier, Haiti's government, Haiti's neocolonial, leaders that are put in place by the United States, they do nothing for the people. They don't work in the interests of the people whatsoever. And so you can't even say, they don't even say, okay, well, we've learned from last time, so now we're going to make sure that we build houses. We're going to have regulations for how houses and schools and hospitals or things are built. Nothing is built. There's no infrastructure. There are like 4 hospitals in the entire country, or a low number like that. And the houses that people are living in cannot protect the people against these types of things, because you can't predict that an earthquake is going to happen, but you can make sure that you have a country with the proper infrastructure so that when an earthquake does happen, it's not too grave of a devastation that takes place. So the numbers are continuing to rise. At one point, it was over 2,000 lives lost and about 50,000 people injured, and hundreds of thousands as far as like buildings that have been damaged. But even yesterday, I was reading that those numbers may be severely underestimated. That it may be even more that is being reported, just not only based on the magnitude, but that people are still not finding people yet, or they're still in the process of finding people who are buried. Some people are coming out alive, some people are being found to be dead. So there's no way to actually know what the actual numbers are in terms of how many lives have been lost, how many people have been injured, and of course how many buildings have come down either, because that kind of data is not being well tracked. So that is the situation that we have right now. And there's also the question of, after the 2010 earthquake, so many charities and NGOs started raising resources in the name of Haiti, but it was only to benefit themselves. The most popular case being the Red Cross, that raised, like billions of dollars, and none of it has gone to Haiti. They only built like 6 houses, and you can't even call those houses. There's the Clinton Foundation as well. And now we're seeing the same thing. I've seen the Clinton Foundation talking about Haiti. I've seen the Obama Foundation, which is absolutely no better than the Clinton Foundation. And while people are generally being more wary as far as not donating to the Red Cross or the Clinton Foundation, there are still so many other NGOs that are, going to be taking advantage of this moment. And just to say, on the question of NGOs, Haiti is coined, like they call it, a capital of NGOs. And it has the number 1 most NGOs per capita in the world as far as a country. And this is the economy, this kind of parasitic economy that has been created in Haiti, that was already there, but especially magnified after the earthquake that took place in 2010, where people, build an economy for themselves off of propping up an NGO in Haiti. And NGOs do nothing, they continue to serve imperialism. They don't do anything to undermine the social system so that one day NGOs will no longer be necessary. They just make their money off of the backs and the misery of the people of the countries that they were placed in. So that is the situation that we are looking at in this moment. Uhuru.
After the Haitian earthquake of 2010, we saw several imperial NGOs or nonprofits from capitalist countries, such as the Clinton Foundation and others, mishandle funds that were supposed to have gone to African people in Haiti and engage in essentially profiteering at the expense of the misery of African people in Haiti. I asked Elikya to comment on that and to say whether she had any faith in the calls for reform on the part of Haitian officials to centralize the process of charitable giving to Africans in Haiti and cut back on this profiteering, or if she expects more imperial looting and profiteering in the name of helping African people in Haiti after this most recent earthquake.
I'm expecting that. I'm expecting that, and I also want to just kind of press again, because I have seen where people have been posting about, okay, don't donate to the Red Cross and don't donate to the Clinton Foundation, and that is very true, very correct. But I haven't seen that for Obama Foundation, which has now been talking about Haiti. It's the same thing. And also just any other organization to just really, really, really do your research. I mean, there are organizations there that are tied to George Soros, so there are so many. I'm not to say that there are zero legitimate organizations, because I think of that many, it'd be impossible to say there are zero. But to really research who, and at this point, I can't even refer anyone as as a legitimate organization, because they have continued the system over the past 10 years. They've figured out how to really hustle, the people of Haiti, some of them being Haiti's own neo-colonial forces. They've learned that as a hustle. So this is on top of the devastation that comes from the natural disaster, this is the second leg of the devastation that we're facing, which is, being taken advantage of this way. Ici, n'importe le a parlé d'Haïti. Mot pour mot, yo dit Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti, pays qui pi pauvre dans l'Amérique. C'est son l'autre gens yo kan dit tout, right? The poorest country in the Americas. Giving Ngoma some.
And that was a section of the song Don't Tell Me Haiti's Poor, composed by Elikya and Ngoma. As well as being the Haiti editor of the Burning Spear newspaper, Elikya is also a musician, and along with Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Louise Kinshasa, and Chairman Amalia Shatella, she composed the African Nation fight song, which is also known as We Are Winning. One of the refrains in this song is a quote from the Haitian Revolutionary General Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Coupe tête, boule caille, or cut heads, burn houses is what it translates to from the Haitian Creole. We asked Elikya and Ngoma to talk to us about why she felt that this quote was important enough to include in the African Nation fight song, and what we need to understand about the legacy of Jean-Jacques Dessalines.
Yes, coupe tête, boule caille. That's my favorite line of the song. When I was writing that song, I felt like it was important for Haiti to have, representation in the song. And that's if someone ever looks at the lyrics of all 5 verses, that's the only verse that is like about one specific place. The third verse, which is about the African Revolution of Haiti. And in fact, I wrote that. At first, I wrote it in English. I just wrote that line, cut heads, burn houses. And when the chairman saw it, he was like, whoa. And I said, no, you remember that's the quote from Dessalines. It's just is that I translated. He said, no, say it in Creole. Leave it how it is. And then, I would just create another line to rhyme with it. So I say, coupe tête boule caille, we will rejoice when the colonizers die. He said, leave it in Creole and we'll just raise the significance of that quote because it's a very non-compromising stance. It's a very clear stance. Cut heads, burn houses. That is the clearest direction for the revolution that they were leading against the French. By the way, I do want to say, I forgot to say this earlier, Haiti has defeated 3 European superpowers: the Spanish, the British, and the French. And at the time that they defeated the French was the most powerful army in the world. In fact, they still try to teach today that Napoleon had never been defeated, but that's not true. He was defeated by Africans in Haiti. So, he thought it was, the chairman thought it was important to keep that line in Creole so that we could teach people not only the line, but the significance of the line. And it becomes a slogan just in the revolution that we are trying to build today. And Jean-Jacques Dessalines, as I said, was an uncompromising leader. He was, a fierce, he was born enslaved. And I actually have an article on the Burning Spear newspaper that it's a two-part that compares Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines from the conditions they were born in all the way to looking at their leadership and even looking at the constitutions that they've both written as well. And when the party talks about today, as far as the African poor and working class, Jean-Jacques Dessalines was very much from the African poor and working class. And he understood that all of the enslavers had to go, that revolution had to happen, that there was no trying to keep the peace or maintain or create a new system where, we both could have power. No, that for African people to be free, the colonial slavery had to be overthrown and colonial slavers had, they had to go. And so he was Toussaint Louverture's, you could say like his secretary general. He was second in command and even warned Toussaint Louverture from having a meeting with the French on the boat, which Toussaint didn't listen. And, he was tricked by the French to have a meeting on the boat. And when he got on the boat, they sailed away and took him to France and locked him up in a mountain where he froze to death. And they just say he died of pneumonia as if they just skipped everything that I just said that happened before that. But, Jean-Jacques Dessalines was no holds bars, and he understood that we had to have power of our own lives. And afterwards, after the revolution, he said that any Black person anywhere in the world, if you make it to Haiti, you will be free. And he did exactly that. He also sent African people from Haiti to other places, neighboring islands, and, to help organize revolutions in those areas as well. So that is who Jean-Jacques Dessalines was and who we hold up as a hero of the African Revolution of Haiti.
And finally, we asked Elikya to talk to us about her article, Lessons from Haiti, or Lessons from Haiti, about this May article that she wrote in the Burning Spear, titled Translation of African People's Socialist Party Platform to Haitian Creole Advances Unity of the African Nation, in which she talked about the recent publication of the 14-point platform of the African People's Socialist Party, known as What We Want, What We Believe, into Haitian Creole, and the revolutionary character of the Haitian Creole language.
That's a really good question. And just to say, at one time, I thought about writing, and I still consider it, it's not an urgent thing, but writing something on Creole itself, on Haitian Creole itself, because a lot of research has been done on Haitian Creole. that I think is just very important. But, Haitian Creole, as you said, it's a language of resistance. It's a language that the Africans used to communicate with each other in organizing the revolution, so that the French would not understand. I also mentioned in a previous article a system called maonage, which comes from the word maon, which is the maroon, that Africans in Haiti used as well. And a lot of times people think about the Maroons or Maon in the physical sense, as in that they hid in the mountains and certain things. But there was a system of hiding in plain sight with the Africans in Haiti. And they did that with the French language. That is to say, if the French enslaver would ask an African a question, they would answer even in French, but it would not mean the same thing that the enslaver is trying to understand. But the African know what they're saying, and other Africans knew. But Creole was developed into its own language. It has, its own alphabet, its own orthography, its grammars, its rules, its regulations. The way we conjugate is completely different, and that's a very empowering thing. And the reason why I found it so important to translate the 14-point platform into Creole was for many reasons. One, 95% of Africans in Haiti only speak Creole. Only speak Creole. Don't speak French, don't speak English, don't speak Spanish, only speak Creole. And, not even speaking Haitian French, which also exists as well, Haitian French. And that's contrary to popular belief. But two, not many things are translated into Haitian Creole because the neocolonialists, they use the population's, the fact that the population does not speak French against the population. So that is to say, you can walk into a court hearing and someone is being tried, and the whole process is happening completely in French, and the person has no idea what's being said by anybody. All they know at the end of it is that two people walk up to that person and start putting them in, start taking them to prison, and they're just like, what just happened? They don't know. And, or, banks or other institutions, you walk in and they ask you, what do you want? But they say it in French because they know the person won't understand. And so they can't even respond to say what service it is that they need. And, in school, a lot of the books are written in French, but the people don't actually speak French. There are some who learn French, who learn French and are able to understand French. But when they go home, they still exist, or outside of the schools, they still exist in a very Creole speaking country. So, math book, science books, textbooks, even those who have a little more advanced education and say, okay, I'm a Marxist, or I'm a feminist, or whatever other theory that they have adopted, that theory came secondary, or it came after they learned another language. That is to say, you can't find feminist theory in Haitian Creole. You're not going to find it. You can't find Marxist theory in Haitian Creole. So for Africans to be able to have African internationalism in Haitian Creole is revolutionary, and also it shows the stance of the party to bring revolutionary intellectualism directly to the people of Haiti, so that they can have this theory they can adopt in their own language for them to understand it. They don't have to go learn English first. Most people are not going to do that. They don't have to go learn French first. Most people are not going to do that. But it's written in the language that 95% of 12 million people located on an island speak every single day. So that is the significance of why it was written in Creole and the significance of the Creole language itself.
And we are here today again with Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee and author of the book Overturning the Culture of Violence, Uhuru Chairwoman Penny, what a powerful interview with Elikya and Ngoma.
Yes, Uhuru, Jamie, that was very powerful. And I also want to salute her presentation at a recent African People's Socialist Party webinar on the situation in Haiti, as well as her lead article in the August 2021 Burning Spear newspaper called "The African Nation Has No Sympathy for Neo-Colonial Puppets, Haiti President Jovenel Moïse Assassinated." Wow, a brilliant article. Just amazing. And she's a regular contributor to the Burning Spear as the Haiti editor. So just really want to salute that and hope we can come back and have a little bit more discussion with Comrade Elikya in our next episode.
Yes, indeed. I know that she's open to that, and we really appreciate her for being on White Lies Shattered, and look forward to that in a future episode coming soon. And I know we definitely want to come back to this question of Haiti, the Haitian Revolution. I just wanted to ask if you could give us a bit of a preview of that future episode, why you think the Haitian Revolution is so significant.
Well, I think that, as Comrade Elikya summed up in the beginning of the interview with her, she was saying the significance of the successful workers and anti-colonial, oppression revolution. The victory of that is unprecedented in this world. It's incredible. And so one of the things that we would like to do is with Elikya sum up first of all, the significance of Haiti's constitution under Jean-Jacques Dessalines after the victory. I mean, an incredibly progressive constitution. This was 1804. And also, I would like to sum up more and go into just the incredible influence that the victory of the African Revolution of Haiti had on enslaved African people throughout the Caribbean, in South America, and in the US and Canada. Just everywhere, African people were energized and inspired and, just impelled to resist the colonial slavery and the brutal conditions based on the precedent of this amazing victory of the African Revolution of Haiti in 1804. So this is going to be very, very interesting and important for all of us in the white population who want to see history as it really is and reality of the world, turned right side up under the leadership of the African Revolution and Chairman Omali Shatella, African internationalism. We're gonna delve into the significance of the African Revolution of Haiti, throughout the Western Hemisphere and the world and the future. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, I am too. One of the things that I find so exciting about this kind of history that's been suppressed, really, we don't hear enough about the reality of the Haitian Revolution, like much of African resistance throughout the history of colonialism. But one of the things I really enjoy are all the fascinating characters like Dessalines, who emerged from this, really heroes throughout the Haitian Revolution and throughout the Caribbean.
Yes, I mean, there is a book, and it doesn't go that much into Jean-Jacques Dessalines, but he is in it. But the book called The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James is a pretty amazing book of the history. To me, it was like a novel. I couldn't put it down. It was an amazing, very well-written history of the African Revolution, beginning before Toussaint Louverture, actually, and other African resistance fighters prior to that, leading up to the revolution, and the class struggles, the class forces, and the very forces in play, and how African enslaved people defeated Napoleon's army, the greatest army, the largest imperialist army that existed. That would be like defeating the U.S. Army today. So, it's an incredible history.
Wow. Well, please, everyone, stay tuned for more on this heroic history of African resistance, including more on the Haitian Revolution, and hopefully more with Elikya and Ngoma, the Haiti expert of the African People's Socialist Party. And I want to thank you, Chairwoman Penny Hess, for joining us again on White Lies Shattered, Reparations in Action. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, and unity through reparations.
You're listening to Reparations in Action.
Reparations now!
This has been an episode of Reparations in Action, the White Lies Shattered series, a biased podcast of white solidarity with Black power. My name is Jamie Simpson. This episode was engineered by Marcel Marius, who also composed our theme music. The show is researched and produced by Penny Hess, Jesse Neville, and Lisa Watson from the Black Power 96.3 FM studio in St. Petersburg, Florida. A shout out to Akile Anayi and DJ Eddie Maltzby, as well as the entire Reparations in Action team, Sandra Forrest, Johan Bedingfield, Amanda Carlozzi, Kyle Weiss, Marissa Ricchetti, Ali Aiello, Alana Woods, Declan Keller, Hallie Murray, and Sarah Rittersbach. If you liked what you heard today, you can go to Apple Podcasts and rate this podcast. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, please email them to us at ria@blackpower96.org. Special thanks to the African People's Socialist Party's chairman Omali Yeshitela, without whose leadership and theory of African internationalism, none of the understandings presented on Reparations in Action would be possible. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.